Hi guys, before we start the episode, we just wanted to let you know that it covers topics like suicide and sexual assault. So if those topics aren't for you, please feel free to skip over it and we'll catch up with you next week. Thanks so much for listening and back to the show.
Welcome to Therapy, Tech, and Takeout. We're a therapist and an entrepreneur talking about and being curious about the intersection of mental health and technology and really just trying to figure out where it's all going to lead. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, Tony. How are you doing this week? What's new?
Well, I'm excited about having a guest. That's always an exciting time and went down the rabbit hole with the topic that we're talking about today. Yesterday, I feel like I maybe went down the rabbit hole too much, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Oh, you're feeling?
How about you? What are you vibing this week?
I am so excited. I'm getting ready to launch a new business, and today we tested our equipment and we're just waiting on one more approval from the county. So hopefully next week we're going to be able to launch. So that's pretty exciting. It's been, as Tony knows, months and months in waiting. So finally to see things starting to click is really exciting. And I'm also super excited to have a guest. I love it. And this topic I found to be so interesting.
Well, I want to say congratulations first. I'm really excited for you. And I love hearing every step of the way. So thanks for sharing it with us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce our guest without further ado?
Yes. Yes. So we have with us today Sheena Beach. She is an advocate for people who desire to feel seen and supported in every space. She's a speaker, a trainer, consultant, licensed mental health therapist, and she has guided many toward elevating emotional intelligence to sustain thriving human-centered relationships. Love that in our tech world. Right. Human-centered relationships, so important, right? She knows firsthand that resilience is about having the skills to navigate life without perfection, but purpose. And when she's not speaking or in therapy sessions, Sheena loves to craft, practice yoga, and read and spend time outdoors with the people she loves the most. And Sheena got introduced to me through a fellow therapist who we had on the show, Lindsay Jonan. And I'm so glad that she put us in touch with each other. So welcome, Sheena.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think everything's in there.
That's great. So, Jackie, want to introduce the topic?
I was going to say, Sheena comes to us with such an interesting topic on cyberbullying and sextortion. She sent us an article from the New York Post about teen suicides related to these extortion scams. And my mind was blown by that article. I found that there were so many oh my goshes. It was horrifying and sad and just not what I was expecting. So I am so excited to get into this topic with you, Sheena, and learn more about it as a parent, as a community member. I think these things are so important to talk about, and I'm really excited to get your perspective.
Yeah.
Speaking of sort of how prevalent is this out there? Do you have any information on sort of those national averages or information around that, around teens and self-harm?
Yes, for sure. Unfortunately, about 17% of teens around the world have some history of self-harm. I think there's a common misconception that self-harm only results when one uses like a tool of some sort, but that can also be related to someone who bangs their head or who starves themselves. There are folks who self-harm by not taking their insulin when they're diabetic. So I think just taking into account all the ways that it happens, and it tends to start around 12 to 15 years of age and some harm for many, many years after that.
That's a shockingly high number. Is there, actions as a parent people can take to be looking out for this more? I know you gave us the age range starting at around 12 that it could be happening and to start looking out for it. So I think that's really helpful. But is there any other sort of advice you would give?
Yeah, I would absolutely focus more on having a good relationship with your child. I mean, we all know I'm a parent too. My child just passed the teen years, so we made it to adulthood.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's a tough time, right? It's a tough time for parents, especially if we have single parents, which there are many, and blended families where things are different at one home than another. So just kind of knowing your child is one of the best ways. Also, like if you notice a sudden shift in your child's behavior, if they start to be more withdrawn, they're really active and outgoing, and they start to like stop going out to see friends, stop doing all their activities. If you notice that they're just exhibiting behavior that is uniquely wild to their typical selves. And other extreme could be if they go completely into like people pleasing, fawning mode where they are like overly nice and kind and sweet so that you don't ask any questions. And you're their parent. Like I tell parents all the time, a phone, while I'm very much attached to my device as well, a phone is a privilege, it's not a right. So making sure that you have control of that device, right? Like you purchase the device, there are apps that you can download, there are phone scans that one can do. I know a lot of times the sextortion tends to be believed to be more female oriented than male, but it tends to be more males affected by this. So just seeing what apps are on their devices, having those parental controls in place can be a really good start.
Yeah, you mentioned the sextortion scam. So we were talking kind of like just self-harm in general, and then the connection between like self-harm and some of the statistics on sextortion. And this is where I went down the rabbit hole when we started today. Today, I mentioned yesterday, just reading kind of article after article and, finding out much more about this topic than I ever thought I wanted to know, realizing how important it was because it can, with the shame that comes with it for some people, where it can lead. Can you like kind of just talk a little bit about like what is sextortion and how is it affecting young people today?
So with sextortion itself, it is generally the use of eliciting trying to think of the word, like images, inappropriate images of the teen or the child, and having them send them out. Most of the time, people kind of frame themselves to be like a friend at first, like they don't come out the gate that way. They mask themselves as like maybe a teenage girl to connect with a boy or a teenage boy to connect with a girl, and just different ways that they infiltrate. Many times they'll send out 100 friend requests and hope for 30 of them to be accepted. They have a lot of information on their pages and their sites that make them very much look like they're a part of the group that team belongs to. So it makes them a little bit more acceptable. And over time, they'll build and gain trust through communication, almost exclusively online, mostly through apps like Snapchat and Instagram. Those are the two biggest that are there. Not a lot of teens use Facebook, so it's not as common to happen there. But you do want to kind of keep an eye on that and notice if like your child is like talking about new friends and like seeing what their friends list look like. Unfortunately, a lot of teenagers have a Finsta, right? They have a Finstagram, so they have a fake Instagram that is not one that their parents are attached to. And it is hard to find because it's very difficult to locate those things. But the more involved and engaged you are with your child, if you have those phone checks on occasion and making sure that they know that you're doing it for their safety, that's helpful. So with the sextortion, it'll start by friendships. They'll gain their trust. They'll engage with them, they'll connect with them on different levels, and then they will start to date them or pretend as if they're romantically interested, and then they'll elicit those photos or those images or those videos. And once they have them, they then start to extort for money. So they will say, like, if you don't send me $500 by this date, then I'm going to put this out on the internet. I'm going to send it to your parents, send it to your school, make
Well,
it live.
they do ask them. So they'll ask them for an explicit image.
Mm-hmm.
As they're kind of friending them, luring them in, grooming them,
Right.
using technology
Yes.
to lure them in. I assume there was some like probably AI use because they talked about like trying
Right.
to FaceTime them and sending messages and having voice. So it's not their voice.
Nope.
And really making them feel so comfortable that they'll send the image in the first place. And then the big thing comes
And then
in.
that's where it comes in, asking for the money or the material resources. And most of the time it is explicit images that they're eliciting. And a lot of times there's shame around that, even in our society, about like one's body. Teenagers feel awkward about the way their body is changing. So if someone express interest or attraction to them, it could be a little bit harder for someone in that age group where their brain isn't like fully formed to make that executive decision that, hey, like that's pretty suspicious that I've known this person for a couple weeks or a couple months and they're asking for this. And it's also a self-esteem thing. Like some folks, they share those images. Like I have these conversations way more often than I would like to with my clients about like what they put on the internet and how it is there forever. Even when I'm working with adults who engage in that type of work, I'm like, you have to be mindful that like once it's out there, and there's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of my questions to you, Sheena, is that like reading this from the outside and being an adult, we do wonder, like, wow, how do they do that, the kids? How do they? But what you're saying is like anyone can really be a victim of this. It
Right. Yes.
probably happens far more often than we think. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
correct. I do find that often what'll happen with adults is they usually find a way to resolve it. Like they'll find a way to like come up with the money or like they'll let someone know, whereas like the shame and embarrassment that a child will feel, they won't even tell their friends. So like basically no one will know what's happening with them. And also look for them to be a bit more attached to their device in more of a frantic sense. So like, yes, we have it in our hand and we're always scrolling, but if you notice like their face changes and they're seeming really upset when they're reading messages, are getting notifications, and that would be a good time to check in.
38 teenage boys in the United States died by suicide since 2021
That's horrific.
And it's all due to
because of
this
this.
specific incident.
Right, exactly.
The other thing I thought was really interesting too was that some of these actors are doing it just for like this like sadism of harming people.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where the group comes in that the FBI is looking for. That was actually founded here, surprisingly, by a
By a
15-year-old
15-year-old.
boy in Texas who
was
started all
bullied.
this.
Yeah.
He was
Was
bullied
a
himself.
victim of bullying. Yeah.
I think there's the hurt people, but technology allows them to kind of amplify that from, the radius of people you can hurt in a face-to-face world versus what you can do really amplifies it.
And also anonymously, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, with the filters and the voice changers and all the AI tools that are available to make someone look completely different or to create a whole person that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
that makes it a lot easier for people to navigate that world and create that kind of harm.
Is there a difference between like digital trauma and like traditional bullying? Is it, I guess anonymity would be one difference. Are there others?
I think the biggest difference is the pervasiveness, like how far it reaches. I have, like, for example, worked with someone who like had a really scary event happen where like basically had a stalker in their building and would show up at their door. And because their roommate shared the story with other people in the building, the entire building now knows about that incident and they don't even know where it came from. Like they don't even know, the people don't even know the person's name who it happened to. They just keep spreading the story. And that's kind of what happens online. So I do think that physically or digitally, bullying is bullying, impacts everyone different ways. Some people have a little bit more resilience than others. But a lot of times when we were younger, like if we had a bully, they were at school, we could change our bus, we could change our class, we could do something different. Like some people move schools even, but when it's digital, it's online. So like they can literally send it to a friend at that school and it is there as well.
Yeah.
The statistics, one of the articles said that 1 in 5 teens that were surveyed by Thorn, which is an organization, it sounded like, that does some technology to help protect teens. They said their survey said 1 in 5 teens surveyed said they had experienced sextortion. 20% of kids have
And you have to
had-
think about it. It's not online only. It's with their friends and peers, like their partners. Like there are a lot of people, their significant other does that to them.
Yeah.
Oh, that was one of the pieces of information that was interesting because we were looking at like, oh my goodness, people from outside, who don't even know them and send out these mass, kind of messages, hope like phishing to see who'll answer them back. But a lot of people are also affected by people they know, partners, friends, past partners. That sextortion isn't just about strangers. Sometimes it's right there in your own backyard.
And it's also, they're not always aware that they're being recorded, right? Like, so like, it's not like someone like whips their phone out and takes the image right away. A lot of times it is an image that's voluntarily sent that can be the start of it. And it just incrementally asks for more and more details. Like maybe someone would send like a topless pic and then maybe someone would send like a completely nude pic. And it's never just the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Most often it is like a pattern over time, and it's when that significant other or that person gets upset with them or they don't comply with their desires anymore, that is when that threat comes through. And a lot of times they'll follow through on that threat. So
Yeah.
that's a big one.
Blackmail. Yeah.
Yes. So I would say that educating your teens and your youth on the crime of sharing child pornography, because even if you take a photo of yourself and distribute it, it is still child pornography if you're under 18. So I have those serious conversations with parents and their teens, like, this isn't just about what the other person can do with this image. This is the fact that this can follow you forever. Like you can be labeled as a sex offender and that can follow you around to your job, to your college, to your environment. So be really mindful about what you send to another person, even in a private message.
And the person who receives it, if they're under 18, if both parties are under 18, it still doesn't matter. It's still
Right.
a sex crime.
It
Yeah,
is.
right.
I
So
didn't quite
education is
understand
another
that. Yeah.
intervention.
Yeah. No, that's really good information.
My first kind of experience with this topic was my kids were young and they were in middle school. And the first letter I'll never forget went out. There was an incident on a girl sent something to a boy or the boy asked for that. I don't know how that went, but he showed everyone else. So there was non-consensual
Yep.
sharing, which is another really huge issue around this. I don't think that that's a crime or that that's harmful, but that's really harmful. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
So the way that you share that story, that's actually what really got me into knowing this topic even before I went into private practice, is because this happened at the middle school that I was based in, where it was a video that one of the middle schoolers had taken, and they showed their friends, and then once their friends had it, they showed other people, and like the teens could not wrap their head around like why it was wrong or why it was such a big deal, because they had asked the person to take it down and they did. But at that point, it had spread so far through the school. The school has 1,000 children in it. Like there's so many ways. And then there's older siblings. So now we have adults that might be looking at these photos and these images. And there are just predators that collect that data, even if they're not in the age group of the individuals who are being affected. So that is kind of how I found out that information. So that's where those apps come into play, like getting a Bart phone. I think we talked a little bit about that. If you're not familiar with it, it's a phone service that is for teens that has parental controls. Basically, like when you have like the bruise that was described earlier and they share the picture, and it's like, oh, this is self-harm. If they say the words around self-harm or speak about suicide at all, if they talk about fighting or any kind of like pain. Sometimes even red paint shows up as like blood or an injury. So like, and the parent gets an immediate alert about that. So that's one phone that they would have to use. So it's an actual device. And then there's apps like Custodio that you could place on your child's phone and it can be monitored from a distance. I am an Android user through and through, and I still have to admit that iPhone's pretty great with their parental controls that you could just like turn them on and off. They can be controlled from the parent's phone. And those are really simple ways to kind of get knowledge, even if your children are more resistant around it, because it's really hard to get around those apps.
Do you feel that there's a place where those, like, where it goes from, like, I'm monitoring to protect you to, like, this is, like, damaging the trust that we have with each other?
Yes, I do believe that there are parents who insist that there are things happening, or they just assume because maybe someone in their friend group or is happening in general. Even though this happens to lots of people and this has many victims, we have to admit that like the grand majority, the 80% of the children who haven't been impacted by this might not need that same level of monitoring, but that also comes from a building trust from the child's perspective. So like, could you ask them for their device? Could you let them know when you're going to look at it? Could it be storing the devices in common areas? That's a really easy way to keep younger children safe. Like have all the computers in a main area. Make sure that everyone plugs their phone in the living room before bedtime. There's many different physical ways to intervene that are a little bit less intrusive.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because I also think, too, one of the other topics we've covered in the past was about like how some of these monitoring apps, like partners, when you get older, are using them. And like it can start from as simple as like, I just want to know where you are and like, you know, that type of tracking. And so like, I feel like a push and pull inside where it's like, I want to know everything, but then I also don't want to set them up to have like the next major person in their life, like, or, you know, and treat them like that too. But,
And also
you know,
being
it's a penumbra, right?
But is it also, are you sharing yours? Like, are you modeling to your teenager, like, that you have people in real life that you're close to and that there are people online that you're close to? And do your boundaries look different for those sets of people? That is a good way. Like, modeling the behavior is the way a child learns. Like, that's the easiest way to teach a child how to be, is to monitor the behavior you want to see. So share your location too. And this is for family, not for friends. I cannot... I don't think I could think of a single person that I work with under 25 whose location is not shared with like a partner or a friend.
Yeah.
My kids know where I am. I know where they are.
We
share location. My daughter lives with 3 other women and they share each other's locations too so that they can keep each other safe. They know where kind of where they are. I mean, these are some positive ways that we can use technology. I had a question really about prevention because, what makes it difficult? I mean, it's the same thing when we talk about any kind of crime, sexual assault. People are always feel it's not going to happen to me, so I don't really have to take in this information. So, how do you think you get and you work with young people, right?
All right.
How do you feel around do they receive this message? How can we help them receive that? Yeah, it might happen to you. Kind of
Right.
listen up a little.
The other side of technology is because of things like TikTok, Instagram, mental health treatment has been much more normalized to be able to pursue and ask for help. I feel like there has been a general shift. Specifically, I would say more with AFAB, female born children are a little bit more willing to acknowledge the dangers of that than I would say a male child might be. And they are also the ones who are getting targeted this much by this particular behavior. So part of it is normalizing these discussions at an age-appropriate information age. A book that I use with my elementary children is My Body is Private. We have a terrible thing happen. Do you have a secret? So there's books and picture books that you can use with children as young as 4 or 5 years old where you help them understand body autonomy and that they don't have to allow anyone to touch their body that they don't want to. And that's even family. Think about us. We grew up. I know I grew up with oh, you have to give them a hug. They're awkward. I've never seen this person before in my life. And I think there was a lot of parents that are kind of moving away from that and making it more of your body is yours. And that goes for everyone. And I think some individuals who are raised with that knowledge and that information are a little bit more wary of how they show that out. So making sure the topic's not taboo to talk about in your house.
Could take away some of the shame around that. Yeah, great tip.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there something that you would say, if you're fortunate enough to have your kid come to you having experienced something like this, is there something that you would definitely tell parents not to say? Is there
Yes.
I'd love to hear the thing to say, but I'd also, want to make sure that we know, what are the things we don't want to say if there's anything there?
Approach it without judgment. Try very hard. You can't necessarily always control your face. I don't really have a good face that I can control well. So I would say making sure that you are open and that you invite the discussion, maybe asking them if they want to talk privately, not having them talk about it in front of everyone else. Definitely don't tell anyone else in the family what happened. That happens a lot where they're oh, they're sending these pictures to these men on the internet. Please don't do that. Don't shame them more.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece is approach that conversation calmly, as calm as you can be. You can fall apart when they leave the room. It's okay. But make sure that they remain the focus of the discussion and not about how it impacts you or your family or how wrong it is or how they shouldn't have done it in the first place. Because at this point, what's done is done. So let's move from a problem solving perspective and how do we move forward?
It's not a teachable moment when your child is, kind of telling you they experienced this. This is a moment for healing and acceptance. And I could see how, as you were talking about it, I was thinking as a parent, how terrified I would be inside, right? And being able not to kind of show that. So, and that makes me think how terrifying it is for a child who doesn't have, kind of the access to the completely formed prefrontal cortex. And it's hard for us as adults. So think about how difficult it is for them.
Well,
don't keep it private.
Yeah.
Don't keep it private yourself. Share your feelings about hey, there's something going on with my kid is really heavy right now. I want to be strong for her, but I need my people right now. I need to go to therapy yourselves. Schedule a family session. See if you can talk it through in an objective space.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. And I thought it was interesting and a good reminder when you said don't share it with other people in the family. I wonder how do you see that if it's does that extend to your partner, the other parent? If it's at the kid's request, does it change versus if it's you feel there's not a reason not to share it? How would you approach that? Again, not telling your sisters and stuff.
Right. I would ask permission, or I would just straight tell them hey, we have to tell daddy, right? We're mommy and daddy in my house, which is lucky for us that she's still an adult and calls us that. But I'm going to have to let daddy know about this. We'll keep it between us. We won't tell your siblings if you don't want them to know. And just kind of do you want to be with me when we have that conversation? Or would you like me to tell, would you like to tell them or would you like me? Offer choice, provision of choice is very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful.
That is, I've worked in sexual assault response and prevention, and one of the first things I teach or used to teach victim advocates was choice. You just had someone who's, everything was really taken away from them, and the movement toward healing is giving choice as much as possible. So I love that you said that. That just kind of reminded me of like how we help people get their power back. And it's through, giving them some choice and just a little choice. Like, do you want this person to know? That could actually contribute to that child or young adult's healing and being a victim. So wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that. It kind of reminded me of how important that is.
It's a really great point. Choice means everything when someone's been violated in that way.
Yeah. And I think, to look at the other outcome of that, like if you're not having that conversation with your kid and you're starting to notice other things happening like self-harm, how is it best for a parent to approach that? Like, how can you be supportive in that situation?
What if you suspect and don't know for sure? I want to piggyback on that, but kind of like, ooh, when we get that sense that something's wrong and we don't want to accuse, or like, how do we have that conversation?
Right. I mean, it's a question, right? Like, again, like the not shameful, making sure they know they're not going to be punished further, like they're already punishing themselves enough. So asking is a good way. A lot of times, like when I talk to my teens, they're like, oh, why didn't you tell your parent you were feeling suicidal or you were somehow they didn't ask? So like, if you don't ask, I won't tell you. And also look for materials. So a lot of times part of it is the caretaking afterwards. That contributes to that. So like look for extra Band-Aids being used. You can see the bank account, make sure to not violate razors at the store and things like that, because that is something that happens. Once you do know they're self-harming, remove all the sharps, put the medications away. Like these are conversations I have to have over and over again with parents of teens who are self-harming. Like they were like, well, I can't live in a house with all my knives locked up. I was like, of course you can. What is taking a key? What is a key and a lock on a door to keep your child safe? Like and that also demonstrates care for the child. So like making sure they're not doing it as if it's like a burden for them to have to take care of their child in that way. So asking is one easy way. Looking for signs and symptoms, that withdrawal, that isolation, changing how they're dressing, which is kind of hard because they wear hoodies all year long, so it's a little bit harder these days. But like if they like typically wear like really like form-fitting clothes or really like stylish wear, like if they start putting on like baggy clothes, hoodies, like a lot of the outward presentation occurs. Like many people who self-harm, like it happens during depression, and there are symptoms of depression to look for, even though every depressed person looks the same. Depressed people can laugh, they can keep playing their sports, they can keep talking to their friends, but you're kind of looking for those personality shifts and those behavior shifts. Spending too much time in their room, like make a rule that the door has to be open. I don't like taking doors. I'm very against taking the door from a teen. I've seen it happen. I know that sometimes it's a safety concern, but I mean, you can take the doorknob, like you don't have to take the whole door. They need privacy.
Say it when you see it. You notice a change in behavior. So, I mean, that's what I'm getting out of what you just said. Really being aware, but then not being afraid to say, I see this change or I notice this thing. What's going on here? And then just, like an open-ended question and see where that goes.
And you could have like family check-ins. Like some families have weekly check-ins. Some families eat dinner at the same table every night. Others don't. I grew up in a house of people with shift work. I had 3 sports, all the clubs, like none of us were ever home at the same time. So just finding those times to connect with your child, because we get busy too. I mean, we're professionals. We have jobs, families, partners to take care of. But making sure you carve out that time for your child so they know they're important, that helps. Because I have seen self-harm happen quite a bit in a child that's kind of under the radar, where like the parents are like, oh, you're good, you're great, you're always good, I don't need to check on you.
Yeah, for sure.
Good point. Yeah. Sometimes it's the kids who are trying to be so perfect and be so good that we really have to be concerned about.
And it's also making sure if they're perfectionists in that way, like that's not healthy either. Like try not to perpetuate that to an extent, because it is okay to make mistakes. All humans are fallible, and it's important to learn that as young as possible.
100%.
And I love that you also reminded like parents that it's okay for them to go to therapy, and and helping ourselves as parents helps our children so much, because we might struggle with perfectionism. We might struggle with saying things out loud and fear and shame and blame. So I think it's really important for parents to take that time for themselves and do some really good self-care.
And also be aware you could go to therapy for parenting. Like you could find a therapist that can help you with parenting. I work with parents. I don't do couples work or family work, but if a parent needs coaching or information about like how to respond to a child who has attempted suicide or a child who has harmed themselves in any way or has been harming for a while, then I am happy to work with those parents on like doing the same as we did today, talking about signs and signals and ways to connect and build trust. Because a lot of times most kids won't come to their parents and let them know that ahead of time. If they did, then it would be less prevalent.
Where are you licensed, Sheena? What
So,
states do you work in, and where do you work?
so I just opened my practice Canopy Counseling last year, and I work in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you. I am also licensed in South Carolina and can do telehealth in Florida.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you. We'll share your information in the
Yeah,
show notes.
100%. And anybody
Thank
who
you.
needs to reach out, definitely reach out. It's so important. I think that's a really great reminder that I wouldn't have honestly thought about therapy for parenting, coaching type stuff, but it makes a heck of a lot of sense and better to get it on the front end than figure it out when they're out of the house.
Absolutely. None of us can do this in a silo. We have to be connected.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for the time today, Sheena. This was really informative.
I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we'll
It's
share
nice to
some
meet you
stuff.
both.
Yeah, we'll share some stuff in the notes on like some of the technology that you were talking about that can be helpful,
Yeah,
and some of the articles that we talked about today too.
absolutely. And
Sounds
those
wonderful.
books
Thank you so
too.
much.
I'll put
Yes,
those in there as well because I always think a good book is really helpful.
it is. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank
Talk to you
you.
All
next
right.
week.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good one.